It is not fair that a government that we voted for, that we really supported, it is mistreating our people, targeting our people unfairly. They started with one, our deputy president. Now it is our own, Ndindi Nyoro. It's so unfortunate. And it is a matter of time. We'll kick you out.
Tumesimama na tumejiunga na kusema ya kwamba Honorable Kimani Ichung'wah achana na mheshimiwa wetu Ndindi Nyoro.
Yes. We stand united in asking the majority leader and the minority leader to cease this unwanted attack on Honorable Ndindi Nyoro.
Without stealing, without anything, our work will be double than yours.
Budget and Appropriations Committee of this House has reached to the level where the chair of that committee, Mr. Speaker, now, members of parliament are going to his constituency for benchmarking, Mr. Speaker. Benchmarking. And all of us are supposed to receive the same amount of NGD-CDF, Mr. Speaker.
This House will not sit back and allow members who sit in the Budget and Appropriations Committee to use the position they hold in that committee to appropriate money to only their constituencies at the expense of other Kenyans.
Let us also not cast aspersions or accuse our own colleagues, because what happens to your colleague today, it can happen to you tomorrow. We know chairs are their positions. I have been a chair, Mr. Speaker, and I've said that. A lot of these colleagues will approach you and come and tell you, help us on this, or call so-and-so on my behalf. So when the chairs offer themselves, and I am very sure, and unfortunately allow me, because I come from Murang'a County, to speak about Honorable Ndindi Nyoro, who was the chair of Budget Committee. He assisted very many members here. But when his time came, the same members, Mr. Speaker, were there casting aspersions and trying to show like Ndindi was favoring himself. Please let's remember the small deeds that our colleagues help us to do. And they are all because they are that privileged position. And let us not accuse each other, because you never know.
The Kenyan political scene witnessed a dramatic shake-up on March 12, 2025. Ndindi Nyoro, a fiery member of parliament representing Kiharu, was ousted from his position as chair of the National Assembly Budget Committee.
The new constitution gave us those powers, Mr. Speaker. But Mr. Speaker, what has been happening the last 2 years in the Budget and Appropriation Committee of this House, Mr. Speaker, borders criminality. If we lay bare, Mr. Speaker, those things, as has been discussed in the retreat we had of the leadership in Naivasha and also in the House Business Committee, Mr. Speaker, those issues, those atrocities, Mr. Speaker, cannot be shied away from talking about, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, how on earth can one county have an allocation, budget allocation of 12 billion shillings and a whole region has 60 million shillings, Mr. Speaker? What kind of country are we living in? Mr. Speaker, the Budget and Appropriation Committee went around the country to do public participation. And they ended up agreeing that they are going to use 2 billion shillings to allocate to those counties that they have visited, Mr. Speaker. That amount ended up ballooning to 12 billion shillings, Mr. Speaker. And the beneficiary of that 12 billion shillings is not those counties that public participation was done on, Mr. Speaker. It is other counties and other constituencies, Mr. Speaker. The Budget and Appropriation Committee of this House has reached to the level where the chair of that committee, Mr. Speaker, now, members of parliament are going to his constituency for benchmarking, Mr. Speaker. Benchmarking. And all of us are supposed to receive the same amount of NGD-CDF, Mr. Speaker. What is making our members to go and benchmark in a colleague's constituency, Mr. Speaker? Because the colleague is receiving more funding because of him being the chairman of the budget committee. Let's be honest to Kenyans. Let's tell Kenyans the truth, that he was sitting in an advantageous position of chairing that powerful committee of the House, which you could do skewed allocation of resources to his constituents, Mr. Speaker. Otherwise, which member of parliament here can afford, through his NGCDF, to build classrooms, plaster them, put windows, put roof, put tiles in the classroom, cabros in the... Mr. Speaker, which member of parliament can afford to do that here? With a mere resources of 100 million shillings, Mr. Speaker, and advertise on Citizen primetime news. Which member can do it? Can you raise up your hand if you can do that?
The move sent shockwaves through the country as Nyoro had been a vocal figure in budget deliberations. Replacing him was none other than Alego Usonga MP, Sam Atandi. Atandi, known for his close ties to Raila Odinga, stepped into the role with a promise of change and equitable resource distribution. The stage was set for a new era in Kenyan budget allocation. The removal of Nyoro, a staunch ally of Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua, was widely seen as a result of the shifting political landscape. It came on the heels of a landmark memorandum of understanding between President William Ruto and opposition leader Raila Odinga. This unexpected alliance had sent ripples through the political establishment, and Nyoro's removal was interpreted by many as a sign of the MOU's growing influence. The National Assembly buzzed with speculation and intrigue as members grappled with the implications of this sudden change. Some saw it as a necessary step towards greater transparency and fairness in resource allocation. Others viewed it with suspicion, fearing that it signaled a power grab by the newly formed alliance. As the dust settled, one thing was clear: the Kenyan political scene was undergoing a period of intense transformation. The removal of Ndindi Nyoro was just the tip of the iceberg, a harbinger of the dramatic shifts to come. The halls of Parliament echoed with accusations as Suna East MP and Minority Leader Junet Mohammed took the floor. Mohammed, a key figure in the opposition, launched a scathing attack on the ousted budget chief Ndindi Nyoro. At the heart of Mohammed's tirade were claims of blatant favoritism during Nyoro's tenure. He accused Nyoro of unfairly channeling a disproportionate amount of resources to his home constituency of Kiharu. Mohammed's words struck a chord with some members, particularly those representing constituencies that had long felt neglected in budget allocations.
None of the 349 members of this House, Mr. Speaker, can afford to do that. That can only be done by somebody who has access to bigger resources than any other member, Mr. Speaker. The Budget and Appropriations Committee did not start the other day. The distinguished leader of the majority party, Mr. Speaker, has been the chair of that committee for many years. And he has never done those things. I have been with him in this House. He has been very careful, and he has shared the resources of the country equitably, Mr. Speaker. I can say that without any fear of contradiction. Mr. Speaker, I want to remind members of this House, for those of us who have been here that time, who have been here for long, when the Budget Committee was chaired by Honorable, what was his name? The Member of Parliament from Embu, the Reverend Mutaba Musimi, Mr. Speaker. Members of that committee did the same thing they have done the last 2 years. And one afternoon, the late Honorable Jacoyo Bidiwo came to the House, and he was seated exactly where I'm sitting today, and told the House the amount of money the Budget Committee put for themselves in the budget, Mr. Speaker. And the whole committee, that time, the membership of the Budget Committee was 52 or 51? 51. The whole committee was dissolved. And a new committee was formed, Mr. Speaker, based on what Honorable Jacoyo presented to the House, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, if the Budget Committee does its business the way that the defunct committee has done, Mr. Speaker, the only option, the only solution, Mr. Speaker, that's available for this House is to convert the 349 members of this House into a Budget Committee. The whole House becomes a committee of the budget, Mr. Speaker.
While the accusations of favoritism swirled around him, Ndindi Nyoro remained defiant, pointing to his tangible achievements in his constituency of Kiharu. He had indeed overseen a period of significant development in the region, leaving an undeniable mark on its landscape. Schools, long neglected and dilapidated, were transformed into modern learning institutions, complete with new classrooms, furniture, and even landscaping. One of Nyoro's flagship projects was the Kirigo Primary School. Once a collection of crumbling classrooms, it was reborn as a vibrant hub of education, boasting a new administration block, a library, and a computer lab. Similar transformations took place at Kahuro Secondary School and Moringa Primary School, where dilapidated structures were replaced with modern facilities complete with tiled floors, fresh paint, and well-maintained grounds. These projects were not just about bricks and mortar, they represented a tangible improvement in the lives of Kiharu's residents. Children who had once struggled to learn in overcrowded and dilapidated classrooms now had access to quality education in conducive environments.
Speaker, this House must also be accountable and must not absolve itself of accountability in regard to the distribution of the national budget. We were treated to a very melodramatic presentation yesterday where accusations were leveled against the Budget Committee and the leadership of the Budget Committee. But we all sit as members of Parliament and we are able to authenticate and even question and query the budget statements that are passed on the floor of this House. So when I see members trying to bedevil each other individually because of perhaps political inclinations, political realignments will come and go. Perhaps maybe Honorable Kenan and I will be on the same side in the next government. So it is very important for us to quit from bedeviling the now, I don't know whether to say former, chair of budget, Honorable Ndindi Nyoro. And he has not been chair budget forever. He was chair budget for, I think, 2.5 years. He was a member of Parliament for Kiharu prior to that. Members of this House have actually gone to his constituency to benchmark on the work that he is doing for the people of Kiharu constituency. And it is the duty of every member of Parliament to sit here when proceedings are going on, when the national cake is being shared, to ensure that the people they represent on this floor get what they are owed by the government, because we are all taxpayers, Honorable Speaker. And we must also ensure that when the President is making declarations, they are declarations that will actually impact on the Kenyan people. I saw a request apparently for a machine that will be making 1 million chapatis a day. We must be able, as members of Parliament, to differentiate rhetoric from the needs of the Kenyan people. Because at the end of the day, in 2027, we will be held accountable by the people who elected us here. So even as we have all these other overriding interests and party positions and whatnot, let us think about the Kenyan people. What do we need to match so that they can feel that they are equally represented?
The community took pride in these visible signs of progress, crediting Nyoro for his commitment to their well-being. However, the source of funding for these projects remained a point of contention. Critics argued that Nyoro had diverted funds intended for other regions to fuel his development agenda in Kiharu. They questioned the fairness of prioritizing one constituency over others, alleging that it exacerbated existing inequalities. The debate over Nyoro's legacy in Kiharu highlighted the complex challenges of resource allocation and the delicate balance between local development and national priorities.
But as leadership and as parties, we have given responsibility and priorities to certain members. And especially on our side, and I'm sure even on Kenya Kwanza's side, we have picked one member per county from different regions and different counties, so that they can represent the interest of those regions and those counties and those constituencies. But Mr. Speaker, it looks like the committee now sits down and agrees on how to share the resources among themselves, forgetting that they are representing Kenyans and they are representing the whole House, Mr. Speaker, in that committee. As the majority leader has said, we will not desist, we will not hesitate to remove any member who behaves like the defected committee, Mr. Speaker. I know there are remnants who have remained in that committee from the previous committee. I don't want to mention their names. We are giving them a warning that if you are not going to share the resources of the country equitably, Mr. Speaker, we will de-whip them. And we will discharge them from the committee, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in conclusion, I saw, I don't want to mention names, an old man who has started a polytechnic which has 10,000 people. And he talked about his polytechnic very passionately. And he said he's requesting the executive to give resources to that polytechnic. And the polytechnic has 10,000 students. Mr. Speaker, in their wisdom of lack of it, through the chair of the committee and the committee, gave that polytechnic in Bungoma 25 million shillings and gave another one in another place 250 million, which has only 2,000 students. Was it 10 million? Yeah. They gave only 10 million there, and the other one they gave 250 million shillings, Mr. Speaker. We are going to name them.
With Ndindi Nyoro removed from his powerful position, the spotlight shifted to his successor, Sam Atandi. As the new chair of the National Assembly Budget Committee, Atandi faced the daunting task of restoring confidence in the budget process and ensuring equitable resource distribution. He took the helm at a time of heightened scrutiny and political maneuvering, with all eyes on his every move. Atandi, a seasoned politician known for his strategic acumen, wasted no time in outlining his vision for the committee. He pledged to prioritize transparency and accountability, vowing to ensure that resources were allocated fairly and equitably across all constituencies. His appointment of Ndebes MP Robert Pukose, a figure known for his financial expertise, as his deputy, was seen as a signal of his commitment to fiscal prudence. The new leadership structure sent a clear message. The era of unchecked discretion and allegations of favoritism was over. Atandi's appointment, a direct result of the Ruto Odinga MOU, signaled a shift towards greater collaboration and consensus building in the budget process. It remained to be seen how this new dynamic would play out in practice, but the early signs suggested a departure from the divisive politics of the past. Atandi's success in navigating the complex web of interests and demands would depend on his ability to build bridges and foster a spirit of cooperation. He would need to balance the competing priorities of different regions, ensuring that no constituency felt left behind. The task ahead was formidable, but Atandi's reputation as a skilled negotiator and a consensus builder gave some hope that he could usher in a new era of fairness and transparency in Kenyan budget allocation.
Mr. Speaker, we will not allow, because this is the house that takes care of the interest of the people, of what is concerned to the people, is discussed here, Mr. Speaker. And this matter of skewed distribution of resources, Mr. Speaker, look at what's happening in the road sector, Mr. Speaker. It's shameful. In the road sector, Mr. Speaker, there are counties that have not seen any cent to tarmac any road, Mr. Speaker. And there are counties that have been having money every year, every month to tarmac certain roads. In fact, very soon, if we continue like this in the next 5 years, there are counties that will donate tarmac roads to others. They will say, take this tarmac and put it somewhere in your county. You can return it back after 2 years. Just use it for 2 years. Because they don't know where to put it, actually. Mr. Speaker, I support the majority leader. This country can only prosper. This country can only go far if, as the representatives of the people, we become equitable in sharing our resources, Mr. Speaker. And that is why the Constitution gave us a mandate to look. Otherwise, the Treasury should bring a budget here and we just approve it as they have done. Because the previous Treasury, the previous Ministry of Finance under the previous regimes used to do very dangerous things in terms of sharing of resources of the country. That is why the new Constitution and the framers of this Constitution felt it fit to bring that mandate to the House. And now we want to allow that mandate to be abused in the House, Mr. Speaker. That will not happen. It will not happen over our dead body.
They pointed to a perceived imbalance in development projects, arguing that Nyoro had prioritized his own backyard at the expense of other regions. The accusations painted a picture of inequality and unfair advantage, fueling a sense of resentment among some quarters of the Assembly. Nyoro, known for his defiant nature, vehemently denied the allegations, dismissing them as politically motivated. He argued that his focus on Kiharu was driven by a desire to uplift his constituents and bridge the development gap. His supporters rallied behind him, praising his commitment to his people and his track record of delivering tangible results. The accusations and counter-accusations highlighted the deep-seated tensions within the Kenyan political landscape. They exposed the fierce competition for resources and the constant struggle for political advantage. As the debate raged on, it became clear that the issue extended far beyond Nyoro himself, touching upon the very core of governance, representation and accountability.